In the far reaches of the Andromeda system, where stars burned faint and cold, a small research team worked tirelessly on a project that could change everything. The planet Varelix was not like Earth. It had no oceans or forests, but it had vast deserts of shimmering crystals under pale skies. This was home for Dr. Lenora Quinn and her assistant Elias Monroe. They were scientists, not warriors, and their work was supposed to bring knowledge, not destruction. Lenora was tall, with sharp features softened by years of staring at data screens. She had dark hair tied back into a loose bun, and her hands were often stained with ink from scribbling notes. Her voice carried authority, but there was kindness behind it. Elias, on the other hand, was younger, just 24, and still learning. He had messy blonde hair and a habit of biting his nails when he got nervous. Despite their differences, they made a good team. Lenora provided direction. While Elias brought energy and curiosity, their mission was clear: develop faster-than-light communication using subspace harmonics. For decades, civilizations across the galaxy had struggled with sending messages over long distances without delays. Traditional methods relied on light-speed signals, which took years to travel between planets. Subspace technology promised instant communication, but it came with risks. Early experiments had caused explosions, blackouts, and even rifts in space-time. That's why Lenora and Elias worked carefully, testing each step before moving forward. The lab itself was tucked inside a dome-shaped structure near the edge of the desert. Inside, machines hummed softly, wires snaked along the floors, and holographic displays floated in midair. The air smelled faintly of ozone, a side effect of the powerful equipment running nonstop. On this particular day, Lenora stood at the main console, adjusting dials and checking readings. Elias hovered nearby, holding a clipboard and jotting down numbers. "Are you sure about this?" Elias asked, glancing nervously at the massive machine in the center of the room. It looked like a giant metal ring covered in blinking lights and spinning gears. "What if something goes wrong?" Lenora gave him a reassuring smile. "We've run simulations. Everything should be fine." "But what if it isn't?" Elias pressed. "This is uncharted territory. What happens if we accidentally send a signal somewhere? Dangerous?" Lenora sighed. She appreciated his caution, but sometimes Elias worried too much. "Elias, every great discovery comes with risk. If we don't try, nothing will change. Now focus, we're close." With that, she turned back to the console and began entering commands. The machine whirred louder, its lights flashing faster. A low hum filled the room, growing steadily until it vibrated through the floor. Outside, the crystal sands shimmered as though alive, reacting to the energy being released. And then it happened. A sudden surge of power shot through the machine, causing sparks to fly. Alarms blared, and red warning lights bathed the lab in an eerie glow. Lenora shouted orders, trying to stabilize the system, but it was already too late. Instead of creating a contained quantum pulse, the device unleashed a wide-frequency burst of shockwave that rippled outward across dimensions. Elias stared at the monitors in disbelief. "Did we just broadcast that everywhere?" Lenora didn't answer. She was frozen, her eyes glued to the screen showing the signal's trajectory. It wasn't confined to their sector of space. It was spreading farther and farther, crossing boundaries no one had ever intended to breach. Somewhere out there, someone or something was going to hear it. Hours later, deep beneath the surface of Earth, an old man named Carl Whitmore sat alone in a dimly lit command center. The room was cluttered with outdated equipment, dusty terminals, and maps of star systems few people remembered existed. Carl had been retired for years, but he still came here occasionally, drawn by habit more than duty. Once upon a time, he'd commanded fleets and led battles. Now, he spent his days tinkering with relics of the past. That evening, as he sipped coffee from a chipped mug, one of the ancient consoles beeped. At first, Carl thought it was a glitch. These machines hadn't worked properly in decades. But when he leaned closer, he saw the code scrolling across the screen. His heart skipped a beat. It was a sequence he recognized instantly, the kind used during the Martian rebellion hundreds of years ago. Carl's fingers trembled as he reached for the COM unit. Call back the fleet, he muttered, his voice barely audible. This can't be happening. He knew what the signal meant. Decades earlier, humanity had created a defense mechanism so powerful it terrified even its creators. The Orion Defense Fleet, equipped with weapons capable of wiping out entire civilizations, had been placed in cryostasis and hidden away. Its activation required specific codes, ones designed to prevent accidental deployment. Yet somehow, those codes had been triggered. Carl's mind raced. Who or what had sent the signal? Was it human? Alien? Or something else entirely? One thing was certain. The fleet would respond automatically unless someone intervened. And Carl was the only person left who might know how to stop it. As he scrambled to decipher the situation, memories flooded back. He thought about the wars he'd fought, the lives lost, and the promises made to never let such destruction happen again. Humanity had moved on since then, focusing on exploration rather than conquest. But now the ghosts of the past were rising once more. Far above Earth, in the void of space, something stirred. Dormant ships blinked awake, their engines roaring to life after centuries of silence. Among them was the USS Exeter, flagship of the Orion Defense Fleet. Its hull gleamed despite the scars of countless battles, a testament to humanity's ingenuity and its capacity for violence. On the bridge, Captain Dana Holloway woke abruptly, disoriented. Around her, officers groaned as they emerged from stasis pods. Some stumbled, their bodies stiff from years of suspended animation. Others moved quickly, instinctively taking their positions. The AI core chimed softly, announcing readiness protocols. Dana adjusted her uniform, smoothing out wrinkles that shouldn't have existed. She glanced around the room, noting familiar faces. Marcus Lee, the tactical officer, rubbed his temples as if warding off a headache. Rebecca Torres, the chief engineer, checked diagnostics with practiced efficiency. Lieutenant Paul Nguyen adjusted his headset, listening intently to incoming reports. "What's our status?" Dana asked, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We're online, Captain," Rebecca replied. "All systems functioning within acceptable parameters. And the signal?" Dana prompted. "It originated from the Andromeda system," Marcus said, pulling up a map on the main display. "Coordinates suggest a planet called Varelix." Dana frowned. "Never heard of it." "No one has," Marcus admitted. "It's outside charted territory." Silence fell over the bridge as the weight of the situation sank in. They had been awakened for a reason to protect Earth, but against whom and why? Back on Varelix, Lenara and Elias watched helplessly as their signal continued to spread. They tried shutting down the machine, but it resisted all attempts. Sparks flew, circuits fried, and the ground shook beneath their feet. "This is bad," Elias said, panic creeping into his voice. "Really, really bad," Lenora nodded grimly. "We need to warn someone, anyone, but who would listen? And how long did they have before whatever they had summoned arrived?" Unbeknownst to them, the countdown had already begun. Across the galaxy, ships roared to life, weapons armed and courses set. Humanity's most lethal fleet was coming, and it wouldn't stop until its mission was complete. The USS Exeter moved silently through the void of space, its engines humming softly as it led the Orion Defense Fleet toward the coordinates provided by the mysterious signal. The ship was a relic of humanity's past, a symbol of power and destruction that had been locked away for centuries. Its hull bore the scars of countless battles, each dent and scratch telling a story of survival against overwhelming odds. But now, after years of slumber, it was awake again, ready to fulfill its purpose. Captain Dana Holloway stood on the bridge, her sharp eyes scanning the displays before her. She was a woman of discipline, her posture always straight, her voice calm but firm. Her dark hair was tied neatly at the back of her head, and her uniform was spotless despite the chaos around her. Dana had spent decades preparing for moments like this, though she never imagined they would come so long after her. Around her, the crew worked tirelessly. Marcus Lee, the tactical officer, studied the star charts projected onto the main screen. His brow furrowed as he analyzed the data, trying to piece together what they might face when they reached their destination. Rebecca Torres, the chief engineer, tapped furiously at her console, ensuring every system aboard the Exeter was functioning perfectly. Lieutenant Paul Nguyen monitored communications, listening intently for any signs of activity from the Andromeda system. For all their training, none of them truly understood why they had been awakened. The signal that triggered their deployment was unlike anything they had encountered before. It wasn't a distress call or an enemy transmission, it was something else entirely. Something alien, Captain, Marcus said, breaking the silence. We're approaching the edge of the Andromeda system. Eta to Virelix is 15 hours. Dana nodded. Good, keep me updated on any changes. Yes, ma'am, Marcus replied, turning back to his console. As the fleet drew closer to its target, tension mounted among the crew. They had been trained to expect the worst, to assume every unknown was a threat. But there was something unsettling about this mission. No one could explain why a defense fleet designed for war had been called into action by a signal from an uncharted planet. The lack of information only added to the unease. In the engine room, Rebecca Torres worked alongside her team to ensure the ship remained in peak condition. She was a no-nonsense woman with short brown hair and grease-streaked hands. Her focus was absolute, her movements precise. To her, the ship was more than just a vessel, it was a living thing, and she treated it with care. How are the reactors? Holding up? She asked one of her engineers, a young man named Kyle Bennett. They're stable, Kyle replied, checking the readings on his tablet. But we've been running them at full capacity since we left stasis. If we don't ease off soon, they'll overheat. Rebecca frowned. We can't afford to slow down, not yet. Kyle hesitated. Do you think we're heading into a fight, Chief? Rebecca glanced at him, her expression unreadable. I don't know. But if we are, I want this ship ready. Back, On the bridge, Dana paced slowly, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The signal didn't match any known patterns used by human colonies or alien species. It was erratic, almost random, as if it hadn't been meant for them at all. Yet here they were, hurtling through space to confront whatever or whoever had sent it. Lieutenant Nguyen, Dana said, stopping near the communications station. Any updates? Paul shook his head. Nothing new, Captain. Still no. Response from Virelix, Dana sighed. Keep trying. Maybe someone will answer. Yes, ma'am, Paul said, adjusting his headset. Meanwhile, deep within the Andromeda system, Lenora Quinn and Elias Monroe continued their frantic efforts to contain the fallout from their experiment. The machine that had sent the rogue signal was still active, its energy output growing unstable. Sparks flew from exposed wires, and the ground beneath their feet vibrated with increasing intensity. This isn't working, Elias shouted, frustration evident in his voice. Every time we try to shut it down, it fights back. Lenora clenched her jaw, refusing to give in to despair. We have to keep trying. If we don't stop it, who knows what will happen? Elias looked at her, his blue eyes wide with fear. What if it's already too late? What if we've summoned something we can't handle? Lenora didn't respond. She couldn't. The thought had crossed her mind too many times already. They had made a mistake, a catastrophic one, and now they were paying the price. Outside the lab, the once peaceful landscape of Virelix was changing. The crystal sands shimmered violently, reacting to the surge of energy radiating from the machine. In the distance, faint lights appeared in the skyships, descending rapidly toward the planet's surface. At first, Lenora and Elias thought they might be rescue vessels sent by neighboring systems to investigate the anomaly. But as the ships drew closer, their sleek designs and imposing silhouettes revealed the truth. They're not from around here, Elias whispered, his voice trembling. Lenora grabbed a pair of binoculars and peered through them. Her heart sank as she recognized the insignia painted on the lead ship's hull. It was unmistakable, a symbol of humanity's military might. The Orion Defense Fleet had arrived. Oh no, Lenore murmured, lowering the binoculars. This is bad. Really? Dad, what do we do? Elias asked, panic rising in his chest. Lenora took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. We need to contact them. Explain what happened. Let them know we're not a threat. But how? Elias protested. They won't listen to. US, we're aliens to them? We don't have a choice, Lenora said firmly. If we don't try, they'll assume the worst. And if that happens... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Both of them knew what would happen if the fleet mistook them for enemies. The weapons aboard those ships were capable of leveling entire cities in seconds. Virelix wouldn't stand a chance. With shaking hands, Lenora activated the lab's communication array. She adjusted the frequency, hoping to find a channel that matched the fleet's. Static crackled through the speakers as she scanned the spectrum, searching for any sign of life. Please, she whispered under her breath. Someone has to hear us. On board the Exeter, Lieutenant Paul Nguyen sat hunched over his console, straining to pick up anything beyond the usual background noise. For hours he had listened to nothing but static. Then, suddenly, a faint voice broke through. Here. Please. Paul's eyes widened. He quickly adjusted the settings, amplifying the signal. Captain, he called out. I've got something. Dana hurried over, her expression wary. What is it? It's coming from Virelix. Paul explained. Someone's trying to reach us. Dana leaned in, listening closely. The voice was distorted, barely audible, but it sounded desperate. Not a threat, accident, need, help. Her instinct screamed caution. Could it be a trap? An attempt to lure them into lowering their guard? Or was it genuine? Can you pinpoint the source? Dana asked, but Paul nodded. It's coming from a structure near the equator. Looks like some kind of research facility. Dana straightened, her mind racing. Tactical, prepare a recon drone. Send it to investigate. Yes, ma'am, Marcus replied, already relaying the order. Minutes later, a small drone launched from the Exeter, speeding toward the planet's surface. Its cameras captured images of the strange, crystalline landscape below, eventually zeroing in on the dome structure where Lenora and Elias were holed up, inside the lab. Lenora and Elias watched anxiously as the drone approached. They had no way of knowing whether their message had been received or if it had even mattered. All they could do was wait. The drone hovered outside the dome, its sensors scanning the area. Inside, Lenora activated the external lights, signaling their presence. She hoped it would be enough to show they posed no danger. On the Exeter, the crew gathered around the main display, watching the live feed from the drone. The sight of the alien structure filled them with both awe and apprehension. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before. Smooth, metallic surfaces blending seamlessly with the natural environment. Interesting design, Marcus remarked. Definitely not human. No visible defenses, Rebecca added. Could be civilian, Dana frowned, or it could be a ruse. Stay alert. As the drone continued its scan, it detected movement inside the structure. Two figures appeared, waving their arms in what seemed like a gesture of peace. Their faces were obscured by the glare of the lights, but their body language suggested urgency rather than hostility. They're trying to communicate. Paul observed. Dana considered her options. Every fiber of her being told her to proceed with caution. But the longer she waited, the greater the risk of misunderstanding and escalation. Prepare a landing party, she ordered finally. We're going down there. The announcement sent a ripple of tension through the crew. Some nodded in agreement, while others exchanged uneasy glances. Whatever awaited them on Virelix, they knew it wouldn't be simple. Back in the lab, Lenora and Elias heard the distant roar of engines as a shuttle descended from orbit. Relief washed over them, followed immediately by dread. They had managed to get the fleet's attention, but would it be enough to prevent disaster? Lenora turned to Elias, her expression resolute. Stay close and remember, no sudden moves. Elias swallowed hard. Got it. As the shuttle touched down outside the dome, the two scientists braced themselves for what came next. Humanity's most lethal fleet had arrived, and with it, the fate of their... The shuttle from the USS Exeter landed with a soft thud, its engines whining as they powered down. Dust swirled around the craft, kicked up by the force of its descent. Inside the domed structure, Lenora Quinn and Elias Monroe watched anxiously. Through the reinforced glass of their lab's observation window, they could see the shuttle clearly now, its sleek, metallic surface gleaming under the pale light of Varelix's sun. It was smaller than they had expected, but it carried an undeniable air of authority. Lenora took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She glanced at Elias, who stood beside her, his face pale and his hands trembling slightly. "Remember what I said," she reminded him softly. "Stay calm. Don't make any sudden moves." Elias nodded, though his wide eyes betrayed his fear. "I'll try." Moments later, the shuttle's hatch opened, and a group of humans stepped out. There were 6 of them, dressed in uniforms that looked both functional and intimidating. Their leader, a tall woman with sharp features and piercing gray eyes, scanned the area carefully before motioning for her team to spread out. She carried herself with confidence, her every movement deliberate and controlled. This was Captain Dana Holloway. Behind her, Marcus Lee adjusted the settings on his scanner, checking for signs of danger. Rebecca Torres, her hands full of diagnostic tools, kept close to the shuttle, ready to repair anything that might malfunction. 2 other crew members flanked the group, their weapons held loosely but within easy reach. The 6th member, Lieutenant Paul Nguyen, stayed near the captain, his headset crackling softly as he relayed updates back to the Exeter. "Structure confirmed," Dana said into her communicator. "No visible threats. Proceeding inside." As the landing party approached the dome, Lenora and Elias moved to meet them at the entrance. The heavy door slid open with a hiss, revealing the 2 scientists standing side by side. Lenora stepped forward first, raising her hand slowly to show she meant no harm. Her voice was steady when she spoke, though her heart pounded in her chest. "We mean you no harm," she said, choosing her words carefully. "We are scientists. We did not intend to summon your fleet." Dana studied her closely, her expression unreadable. "Who are you?" she asked, her tone clipped but not hostile. "My name is Lenora Quinn," Lenora replied. "This is my assistant, Elias Monroe. We work here at a research facility dedicated to exploring subspace harmonics." Dana glanced at Marcus, who gave her a subtle nod. His scans showed no immediate threats, but that didn't mean much. Weapons could be hidden, and appearances could deceive. Still, something about Lenora's demeanor struck Dana as genuine. She decided to press further. "What happened here?" Dana asked, gesturing toward the lab behind them. Lenora hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. But time was running out, and honesty seemed like their best option. "We were conducting an experiment," she explained. "We wanted to test faster-than-light communication using quantum pulses. Something went wrong. Instead of a contained signal, we broadcast something else, something we couldn't control." Dana's brow furrowed. "You sent a subspace transmission?" "Yes," Lenora admitted, "but it wasn't supposed to go so far. We never imagined it would reach Earth or awaken your fleet." At this, Dana exchanged a glance with Paul. The pieces were starting to fit together, but there were still too many unanswered questions. Why had such a small facility been working on advanced technology? And why hadn't they taken precautions to prevent an accident? Before Dana could ask more, Elias spoke up, his voice shaking. "Please believe us. We didn't mean to cause trouble. We're just trying to understand the universe like you." Dana turned her attention to him, noting the fear in his eyes. It wasn't the look of someone who had planned an attack. If anything, he seemed terrified not of them, but of what might happen next. "Take us inside," Dana ordered finally. "Show us what you've been working on." Lenora nodded and led the way into the lab. As they entered, the humans looked around in awe. The room was filled with equipment unlike anything they had ever seen. Holographic displays floated in midair, showing complex diagrams and equations. Machines hummed softly, their lights flashing in rhythmic patterns. In the center of it all was the source of the problem, the massive machine that had sent the rogue signal. "This is it," Lenora said, pointing to the device. "It's designed to generate quantum pulses. When we activated it, something went wrong. The energy output surged beyond our calculations and the signal escaped. Rebecca stepped forward, examining the machine with keen interest. This technology is impressive, she remarked, but unstable. You're lucky it didn't tear a hole in space-time, Lenora sighed. We know that now. Believe me, if we could undo what we've done, we would. Dana crossed her arms, her mind racing. Everything Lenora and Elias had said so far seemed plausible. But one question remained. Why hadn't they shut down the machine once they realized? What had happened? Why is it still active? Dana demanded, motioning toward the glowing core of the device. Lenora shook her head. We've tried. Every time we attempt to disable it, the system fights back. It's as if the machine has developed a will of its own. Marcus frowned, studying the readings on his scanner. That's impossible. Machines don't think for themselves. Maybe not normally, Lenora conceded, but this one, it's different. The quantum pulse disrupted, something opened a connection we can't close. Dana's instincts told her to trust these scientists, but caution held her back. Too much was at stake. If even a fraction of what they said was true, then humanity's arrival had been entirely accidental. But accidents could escalate quickly, especially when fear and misunderstanding were involved. We need to assess the situation further. Dana said after a moment, For now, stand down. Do not interfere with our investigation, Lenora nodded eagerly. Of course. Anything you need. As the humans began inspecting the lab, Elias leaned closer to Lenora and whispered, Do. You think they'd believe us? I hope so, Lenora replied quietly. But we can't count on it. Not yet. Meanwhile, back on the Exeter, Carl Whitmore listened intently to the reports streaming in from the landing party. He sat alone in the command center, his weathered hands gripping the edges of the desk. The old man's face was lined with worry, his thoughts consumed by the implications of what was unfolding. They're peaceful, Dana reported over the comlink. At least they seem to be. Their story checks out so far. Carl exhaled sharply, relief washing over him for a moment. Then doubt crept back in. Are you sure, Captain? This could be a trick, a setup. I'm aware of the risks, Dana replied firmly. But unless we find evidence to the contrary, I see no reason to assume hostility. Carl rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He had spent years preparing for scenarios like this, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of it. The Orion Defense Fleet had been built for war, not diplomacy. Yet here they were, walking a fine line between caution and aggression. Keep me updated, Carl instructed. And remember, this isn't just about Varelics. It's about humanity's future. One wrong move and we could start a war we can't win. On Varelics, tensions simmered beneath the surface. While Lenora and Elias cooperated fully with the humans, they couldn't shake the feeling that disaster loomed just out of sight. Every word, every action felt like it carried the potential to spark conflict. Inside the lab, Rebecca worked tirelessly to analyze the rogue machine. Her fingers flew across her tablet as she input data, her focus absolute. Beside her, Marcus kept watch, his weapon slung over his shoulder but always within reach. This thing is incredible, Rebecca muttered, half to herself. If we could replicate this technology safely, it could revolutionize communication across the galaxy. But we can't, Marcus pointed out. Not until we figure out how to shut it off. Rebecca nodded grimly. Agreed. For now, let's focus on containment. As the hours passed, the humans made slow but steady progress. They managed to stabilize the machine's energy output, preventing it from causing further damage. But shutting it down completely proved elusive. Each attempt triggered a surge of resistance, forcing them to pull back before things spiraled out of control. Outside the lab, night fell over Varelics, casting the crystalline desert in shades of blue and silver. The humans set up temporary quarters near the shuttle, taking turns keeping watch while others rested. Despite the uneasy truce, no one dared let their guard down completely. Lenora and Elias stayed awake, unable to sleep. They sat together in the lab, watching the humans through the windows. The sight of armed soldiers patrolling outside their home was surreal and terrifying. What happens if they decide we're lying? Elias asked quietly. Lenora didn't answer right away. She stared at the glowing core of the machine, lost in thought. Then we fight, she said finally. Not with weapons, but with truth. We tell them everything, show them we're not their enemy. Elias looked at her, admiration and fear mingling in his eyes. You really think that'll work? I have to believe it will, Lenore replied. Because if it doesn't, none of us will survive. Unbeknownst to everyone, however, trouble was brewing elsewhere. High above Varelix, the rest of the Orion Defense Fleet orbited silently, waiting for orders. Among the ships, whispers of dissent began to spread. Some crew members questioned why they were wasting time investigating a single planet when their mission was clear. The tension aboard the USS Exeter was palpable. Despite the apparent cooperation from Lenora and Elias, doubts lingered among the crew. Rumors spread like wildfire through the fleet, fueled by fear and impatience. Some believed the Verelixians were hiding something, while others questioned why Captain Holloway hadn't acted more decisively. The longer they stayed in orbit, the more restless the soldiers became. On the bridge, Dana Holloway stood firm, her sharp eyes scanning the monitors before her. She knew the risks of hesitation, how easily it could be mistaken for weakness, but she also understood that rushing into action without understanding could lead to disaster. Every decision she made carried weight, not just for the lives of her crew, but for the future of humanity itself. Status update? Dana said, her voice calm yet commanding. Marcus Lee glanced up from his console. The machine is stable for. Now, Rebecca's team has managed to reduce its energy output, but shutting it down completely is still out of reach. Dana nodded. And the Verelixians? They're cooperating fully, Marcus replied. No signs of deception so far? Paul Nguyen chimed in, adjusting his headset. Captain, I've intercepted chatter from the other ships. Some officers are questioning our delay. They think we should take a more aggressive approach. Dana's jaw tightened. She had anticipated this. The Orion Defense Fleet had been built for war, and its members were trained to act swiftly and decisively. Diplomacy wasn't part of their design. But Dana refused to. Let fear dictate her actions. Tell them this isn't a war zone, she said firmly. Not yet. We have no proof these people are hostile. Until we do, we proceed with caution. Yes, ma'am, Paul replied, though his tone betrayed unease. Meanwhile, back on Varelix, Lenara and Elias worked alongside Rebecca and her engineers to find a solution. The lab buzzed with activity as humans and aliens collaborated, their shared goal bridging the gap between species. For Lenara, it was both surreal and hopeful, a glimpse of what might be possible if fear didn't rule the day. This circuit is fried, Rebecca muttered, crouching beside a panel of exposed wires. If we reroute power here, maybe we can bypass the resistance. Lenora knelt beside her, examining the damaged components. That might work, but you'll need to recalibrate the stabilizers first. Otherwise, the surge will overload again. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. You're pretty good at this, Lenora gave a small smile. Years of practice. Elias watched them from across the room, marveling at how quickly they had adapted to each other's methods. It was strange seeing humans and Verelixians working together seamlessly, almost as if they belonged to the same world. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Do you think they'll trust us? Enough? Elias asked quietly, approaching Lenora when Rebecca stepped away to consult with Marcus. Lenora sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I don't know. Trust takes time, and we don't have much of that. Elias frowned. What happens? If they decide we're lying? Or worse, if someone higher up orders an attack? Lenora hesitated, her expression grim. Then we fight not with weapons, but with truth. We show them everything, our research, our intentions, our mistakes. We leave nothing hidden. Elias swallowed hard. And if that doesn't work? Lenora looked at him, her voice softening. Then we hope for a miracle. Back aboard the Exeter, dissent within the fleet continued to grow. On the USS Guardian, a junior officer named Lieutenant Ryan Cole voiced his frustrations during a briefing. We're wasting time, he argued. These aliens could be planning an ambush. Why are we sitting here instead of securing the planet? Commander Lavra Hayes, the ship's captain, listened patiently, though her patience was wearing thin. Because Captain Holloway gave us orders, she replied evenly. Orders we follow, Ryan crossed his arms, unconvinced. Orders based on what? A gut feeling? We don't even know if these creatures are telling the truth. Lavra leaned forward, her tone sharpening. We follow protocol. That means waiting for confirmation before acting. If you forget that, Lieutenant, then you've forgotten why we're here. Ryan clenched his fists but said nothing. He wasn't alone in his concerns, and he knew it. Across the fleet, whispers of rebellion began to spread. Soldiers muttered about taking matters into their own hands. Convinced that diplomacy was a luxury they couldn't afford. News of the unrest reached Carl Whitmore. Back on Earth, sitting in the dimly lit command center, he listened intently to reports streaming in from various ships. His aged face was lined with worry, his thoughts consumed by the gravity of the situation. Captain Holloway is doing her best, Carl said aloud, speaking to no one in particular. But even the strongest leaders can't hold back the tide forever. He tapped a button on his console, opening a secure channel to the Exeter. Captain, he said when Dana answered, we've got a problem. Dana's expression darkened. What kind of problem? Mutiny, Carl replied bluntly. Some officers are questioning your authority. If this keeps up, it could spiral out of control. Dana exhaled sharply, her mind racing. She had anticipated resistance, but not outright insubordination. Understood, I'll handle it, Carl hesitated. Be careful, Captain. One wrong move and you could lose the fleet entirely. On Varelix, the fragile peace began to crack. As night fell once again, a recon drone sent by the USS Guardian malfunctioned mid-flight. Its systems overloaded, causing it to plummet toward the surface. The impact triggered a small explosion near the edge of the crystalline desert, sending shards of glowing rock flying in all directions. Inside the lab, alarms blared as sensors detected the blast. Lenora and Elias rushed outside, followed closely by Marcus and Rebecca. Smoke rose from the crash site, illuminated faintly by the moonlight. What happened? Lenora demanded, turning to Marcus. It's one of ours, Marcus admitted, his voice tight. A drone. Must have short-circuited. Before anyone could respond, shouts erupted from nearby. A group of armed soldiers emerged from the shadows, their weapons drawn. They weren't part of the landing party. They had come from another ship. Stand down, Marcus ordered, stepping forward. This is a misunderstanding. But the soldiers ignored him, their faces hardened with suspicion. One of them, a burly man with sergeant stripes on his uniform, pointed his rifle at Lenora. You set that off, he accused. You lured us here under false pretenses. Lenore raised her hand slowly, her heart pounding. That's not true. We didn't. Enough, the sergeant barked. We're done playing games. Elias froze, panic rising in his chest. They don't believe us? Marcus tried to intervene, but the soldiers pushed past him, surrounding Lenora and Elias. The situation escalated rapidly, with voices rising and tempers flaring. In the chaos, a single shot rang out, a warning fired into the air by one of the soldiers. The sound echoed across the desert, shattering the fragile calm. Back at the shuttle, the rest of the landing party scrambled to respond. Dana, alerted by Paul, raced toward the commotion, her pulse racing. When she arrived, the scene was tense. Soldiers held their ground, weapons trained on the scientists. Lenora stood protectively in front of Elias, her expression defiant despite. The danger. What's going on here? Dana demanded, her voice cutting through the noise. The sergeant turned to her, his face flushed with anger. These aliens are hiding something. That explosion proves it. It was an accident, Marcus interjected. A malfunctioning drone, nothing more. Dana studied the situation carefully, weighing her options. She couldn't afford to let emotions override reason, but neither could she allow her crew to act recklessly. Lower your weapons, she commanded finally. Now, reluctantly, the soldiers obeyed, though their distrust remained evident. Dana stepped closer to Lenora, her gaze steady. Is everyone unharmed? Lenora nodded, her voice trembling slightly. Yes, thank you. Dana turned to the sergeant. Return to your ship, this matter is resolved. The sergeant hesitated, clearly unhappy with the order. But after a moment, he signaled for his men to fall back. As they retreated, Dana turned her attention to the scientists. We need to finish this, she said firmly. Tonight. Lenora agreed, knowing there was no time to waste. With renewed urgency, the humans and Virilixians returned to the lab, determined to shut down the rogue machine once and for all, for hours. They worked tirelessly, their movements synchronized despite the exhaustion weighing them down. Rebecca and Lenora coordinated efforts, rerouting power and recalibrating systems. Marcus monitored the readings, alert for any sign of instability. Elias assisted where he could, his hands shaking but steady. Finally, just as dawn broke over the horizon, they succeeded. The machine's core dimmed, its glow fading until it was nothing more than a quiet hum. The threat had been neutralized. We did it, Rebecca breathed, relief washing over her. Lenora smiled weakly, leaning against the console for support. Let's hope it's enough. But even as the lab fell silent, uncertainty lingered. High above Virelix, the fleet remained on edge, tension simmering beneath the surface. While the immediate danger had passed, the larger conflict was far from over. Trust had been tested, alliances strained, and the line between friend and foe blurred beyond recognition. On the Exeter, Dana addressed her crew, her voice resolute. Today, we prove that cooperation is possible. But tomorrow, we must prove it again and again until there's no doubt left in anyone's mind. We came here to protect humanity, but we cannot do. The sun rose over Virelix, casting long shadows across the crystalline desert. The air was still, heavy with the weight of what had transpired. Inside the lab, the humans and Virilixians stood together, their faces etched with exhaustion but also quiet triumph. The rogue machine that had brought humanity's most lethal fleet to their doorstep was finally silent. Its core no longer pulsed with dangerous energy, and the threat it posed had been neutralized. Lenora Quinn leaned against the console, her arms crossed as she watched the humans prepare to leave. She felt a strange mix of emotions, relief that the crisis had ended, gratitude for Captain Holloway's restraint, and sadness at the thought of parting ways. For all the fear and misunderstanding, something remarkable had happened here. Two vastly different species had worked side by side. United by a common goal, Elias Monroe sat nearby, his head resting on his folded arms. He looked drained, both physically and emotionally, but there was a faint smile on his face. We did it, he murmured, almost to himself. We actually did it, Lenora nodded. Yes, we did. But let's not forget how close we came to disaster. Her words hung in the air, a reminder of how fragile the peace had been and might still be. Outside, the soldiers from the USS Exeter were packing up their equipment, preparing to return to their ships. The tension that had gripped them just hours earlier had eased slightly, though it hadn't disappeared entirely. Some glanced warily at the Virilixians, while others avoided eye contact altogether. Captain Dana Holloway stood near the shuttle, overseeing the operation. Her expression was calm, but her mind was racing. She knew the battle wasn't truly over. Neutralizing the machine had solved one problem, but the larger issue, the growing unrest within the fleet, remained unresolved. If she didn't act soon, the fragile trust they had built could shatter completely. Captain, Marcus Lee called out, approaching her with a datapad in hand. Final reports are in. The machine is stable, no risk of further surges. Dana took the datapad and skimmed the information. Good work, Lieutenant. Make sure everything is documented. We'll need this data when we report back to Earth. Marcus hesitated, then added, What about the Virilixians? Should we offer them protection? Dana sighed, lowering the datapad. That's not our call to make. Our orders were clear. Assess the situation and eliminate any threats. Technically, the mission is complete. But technically isn't always right, Marcus pressed. They're not enemies, Captain. They're victims of their own mistake, a mistake we helped fix. Leaving them unprotected feels wrong. Dana studied him for a moment, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. She wanted to agree, to promise that humanity would stand by these people who had shown such courage and cooperation. But she knew better than to make promises she couldn't keep. The decision wouldn't rest with her, it would rest with Earth's leaders, many of whom might see the Virelixians as nothing more than potential liabilities. For now, Dana said finally, all we can do is ensure they have the tools to defend themselves. Beyond that, she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Marcus nodded grimly, understanding the unspoken truth. Whatever happened next, it was out of their hands. As the humans boarded the shuttle, Lenora approached Dana, her steps slow and deliberate. Thank you, she said softly, for believing us. For giving us a chance. Dana met her gaze, her gray eyes softening slightly. You earned that chance. Not everyone would have cooperated the way you did. Lenora smiled faintly. Still, not everyone would have trusted us enough to try. Before Dana could respond, Elias stepped forward, holding out a small device. It was a portable storage unit, glowing faintly with stored data. This contains everything we know about the machine, he explained. Maybe your scientists can figure out how to use it safely someday. Dana accepted the device, nodding. In appreciation, we'll make sure it gets to the right people. With that, the shuttle hatch closed, sealing the humans inside. As the engines roared to life, Lenora and Elias stepped back, watching silently as the craft ascended into the sky. Within moments, it disappeared into the clouds, leaving behind only the faint hum of its departure. Back aboard the USS Exeter, the mood was subdued. The crew moved through their tasks with mechanical precision, their thoughts clouded by uncertainty. While some were relieved that the mission had ended without bloodshed, others remained uneasy, convinced that trusting the Virelixians had been a mistake. In the command center, Carl Whitmore listened intently to the final debriefing from Dana. His aged face was lined with worry, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted the controls. The old man had spent decades preparing for moments like this, yet nothing could have prepared him for the reality of it. They cooperated fully. Dana reported. Their story checks out. The machine was an accident, not a weapon. Carl exhaled sharply, leaning back in his chair. And the fleet? How are they reacting? Dana hesitated, choosing her words carefully. There's dissent. Some officers believe we should have taken more aggressive action. They think the Virelixians are too dangerous to leave unchecked. Carl rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. And what do you think, Captain? I think fear makes us blind, Dana replied firmly. If we destroy every unknown, we lose the chance to learn, to grow. Today, we prove that diplomacy is possible even in the face of danger. Carl nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. Then let's hope Earth listens. Because if they don't, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Both of them understood the stakes. Humanity's reputation was on the line not just with the Virelixians, but with the entire galaxy. One wrong move, and they could become the very thing they feared: invaders, conquerors, destroyers. On Earth, news of the incident spread quickly, though details were sparse. Governments convened emergency meetings, military leaders reviewed the data, and scientists pored over the information provided by the Virelixians. Opinions were divided. Some argued that the aliens posed no immediate threat and should be left alone. Others insisted that humanity couldn't afford to take chances, that the Virelixians must be monitored closely, if not eliminated outright. Amid the chaos, Carl Whitmore stood before a panel of officials, his voice steady despite the pressure. We sent the Orion Defense Fleet to protect Earth, he began. But protection doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes it means restraint. Sometimes it means listening instead of assuming. His words resonated with some, but not all. The debate raged on, fueled by fear and uncertainty. In the end, a compromise was reached. Earth would establish a diplomatic envoy to maintain communication with Virelix, offering aid and support while keeping a watchful eye on their activities. It was far from perfect, but it was a start. Weeks later, On Virelix, life began to return to normal, or as close to normal as it could be after such an event. Lenora and Elias resumed their research, though with newfound caution. The experience had taught them the dangers of unchecked ambition, and they vowed to approach their work differently moving forward. One evening, as the twin moons cast their soft glow over the desert, Lenora and Elias stood outside the lab, gazing up at the stars. Somewhere among those distant lights, humanity continued its journey, navigating the complexities of exploration and survival. "You think they'll come back?" Elias asked quietly. Lenora shrugged. Maybe not. Either way, we'll be ready." Elias smiled faintly. "Yeah, ready to show them we're worth trusting." Lenora placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression resolute. "Trust is earned, Elias, and we've only just started." Far above them, the USS Exeter and its fleet drifted silently through space, their mission complete but their purpose evolving. For Captain Dana Holloway and her crew, the encounter with the Virelixians had been a turning point, a reminder that even in the vastness of the universe, connections could be forged and bridges built where none had existed before. As the ship disappeared into the void, its wake carried more than just memories of conflict. It carried hope for understanding, for cooperation, and for a future where differences didn't have to mean division.